Matt, so good we can chat today. I know we'd connected and, from our first conversation, we were like, this might be interesting to talk about. Recruiting, hiring, top of mind right now at the tail end of 2023, looking into, none of us ever knows what the future is going to bring, but, all the reports I'm reading are just a lot of questions about 2024 and 2023 itself. A little bit of ups and downs. Some people seeking new roles. So felt like it'd be a really good time to sit down with someone in the recruiting, hiring, placement space, and just capture some thoughts, pick your brains. I know you have deep experience in sort of placement in tech spaces and high tech, kind of the places where I've spent a lot of my career. So I'm not going to introduce you. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Why don't you tell us, anyone tuning in, where today finds you, where you're at, and then give me a little bit about MJL and fill us in on the backstory if you'd be so kind.
Yeah, so I find myself in the beautiful, rainy Pacific Northwest, Washington State, north of Seattle. I don't know if it's supposed to rain today or not. Hopefully not. I'm not a rain guy, so I'm probably in the wrong place here. But I've been in the recruiting industry for 7 years now. The vast majority of it in the IT and engineering space. A lot with Fortune 500 companies. I spent 17 months with Microsoft, and now I'm targeting and working with the startups and mid-sized businesses because they need help in their recruiting and hiring process. So just about 9 months ago, I founded my own company, MGL Recruiting and Consulting, to challenge the way that recruiting has traditionally been done and is kind of accepted across the industry. And I'm here to challenge that, to challenge companies to think outside the box, to do it differently, because the way that it's being done right now is not as efficient and effective as it could be, not by a long shot. So I'm here to challenge some people's commonly held perceptions and get them to think differently about how recruiting should be done.
Awesome. Yeah, I've never gotten placed by a recruiter, but in spaces where, mentored a lot of early stage career and even career pivot, individuals sort of staring that down. And it's a big deal, to kind of bring, you think of work where you spend, 8, 10 hours a day, maybe more, depending upon the industry,
Yeah.
really making sure that your personality, sort of your wiring and your alignment aligns with the organization that you're looking to throw in with and really cast your lot with. So yeah, gray down here in Portland, Oregon as well. So feeling you on that. um, Excellent. Yeah. So MJL, focused on those IT engineering technical spaces. Well done on hanging out your shingle. How's it been? Looking at coming up on a year in, what's the journey been like so far? Lessons learned, things you expected, things that caught you unawares. What's it been
Oh
like?
yeah, it's I never owned my own business before, so it's been learning all of the things that you have to learn when you start your own business. Like, you don't just show up and or like, oh, I know who you are and I want to work with you. It's a lot of the grunt work on getting the name out, getting out what I do and how I go about doing it, and really actually challenging the narrative that's been accepted
Yeah.
and been followed for the last 20 or 30 years. But I met a lot of amazing people. I mean,
Mm.
you're one of the top most amazing people I've met in all of my networking that I've been doing. So super grateful that we were able to meet, and great to have this conversation today. But it's been a lot of learning. It's like I wake up every day and learn 10 things that I didn't know the day before. It's like, oh, there's 10
Yeah.
more things I need to add to my list of things, to do. I had a meeting right before this and he's like, have you ever thought about doing this with LinkedIn? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like a moron that I never thought of using LinkedIn for that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's a lot of learning, but it's helped me grow, I think, an amazing amount. And I'm excited to see where the future takes us.
Yeah, I'm not much farther ahead of you. Hung out my shingle 2021 and still very much learning the entrepreneurship game. My dad was a solopreneur, had seen it done for many years and didn't think, had never really thought, oh, that's the way I'm wired. But there's something fun about, punching your own check, living and dying by your own hand, having to scrap. And, for anyone who's ever contemplated it, I mean, the thing I tell people is like, just, yeah, go after it. You can always jump back into it. Maybe you don't necessarily have to throw in yourself full, start it up as a side hustle. And yeah. And then on the biz development side, yeah, I mean, having conversations, when you and I chatted, that's where what I found to be the most useful thing, the cold calling, cold email, at least in my industry, marketing and strategic branding, it really has to come out of the conversations, and it has to feel natural. And the joy of, running your own show is you more or less get to choose who you work with, seek out culture fit, values alignment, and really just, the industries you support. And I mean, you're in a great location, Seattle. I mean, you have some big tech players there, the home of many established, Fortune 100, Fortune 50 global companies. So yeah, you're probably your geographic placement is probably helpful for what you're putting out there.
It is, and I'll say this, and we can get into the meat of this, but I and I don't know if I said this when we first chatted or not, but I was the same way as you were. Like, and I never had a. My dad is not a solopreneur. He wants to do it when he retires next year, but um, never had a thought of being an entrepreneur until about 9 months ago when my wife asked me one question. I was like, "Oh, I can do that," and
Yeah,
I was like, and I had multiple people ask me over the years, "Why have you ever thought about starting your own business?" I was like, are you joking? Like, is that a serious
yeah,
question for me? No,
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want to do sales. I don't want to do the whole full desk thing. I did recruiting to get out of sales, to get
yeah,
out of direct sales, not to
yeah,
get back into it again. But she asked the question, is like, the sky's opened and here we are.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well done. Yeah. Well, here's to supportive spouses, man. I mean, yeah, my wife, yeah, she has a 9 to 5, so she can kind of hold down things like healthcare. And
Yeah.
man, I know people are like co-founder teams or both spouses are entrepreneurs, and I'm like, man, that sounds that's worrisome. That just sounds like a lot of stress. But man,
Yeah, I don't know that I would enjoy that if my wife was also an entrepreneur and we have 3 kids. That would be that'd be a lot of stress. We'd work like 18-hour days.
that's well, yeah, exactly. How old are your kids? Remind me.
11, 10, and 5.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, you're in it. My boys are 10 and 8. So, yeah, it's a fun period, but yeah, you definitely, everything I've heard from people who are maybe a little further down the road, embrace it, enjoy it, be in it. I love what I think I mentioned this in our first chat, like Ryan Holiday and his kind of daily dad, layering on the concept of like stoicism, presence, just sort of like being there, making sure like even though parts of it are really, really hard, just living it because, before you know it, you blink and it's blazed by.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and I'm going to tie this to business real fast, but
do it.
I was just thinking about this last night, because we've kind of gotten away from having the hard conversations in
Mm,
every area of life, but when you're raising kids, there is moments that you have to have them.
yeah, yeah,
Like my kids, the older two are at the age where it's time to start talking about puberty and body changes. It's like, this is
yeah,
weird. Like, I don't want to talk to my kid about, well, you're going to get hair here and you're going to get hair there. And this is what's going to happen to your voice. And this is what's going to happen to your emotions. Like, because I never got that talk. My parents didn't have that talk with me. So I don't have,
yeah.
any experience with John, but it ties directly to business. Because like, we've gotten away from having those kind of harder conversations, and it
Mm,
specifically in recruiting, because, and I know I'm jumping the gun here, but um, I think it ties perfectly right here is, giving feedback to candidates, giving honest feedback to candidates.
yeah,
We've really shied away, and it's this very broad themed, well, you just didn't fit.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, but as the candidate, what am I supposed to do with that?
Mm,
How
hmm.
is this experience going to make me better if you don't tell me where I fell short?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, what's that? I think it's Brene Brown who has that quote, clear is kind,
Yeah.
unclear is unkind. Sometimes the hardest thing to say is at its root nicer to the person hearing it. Yeah, no, I completely agree that. And when I'm on the other side of the table, when I'm coaching someone or mentoring someone who's going through a career transition, the first thing I always say is this is a really good time for you to reflect. Figure out what worked, what you've liked in your career. If they're mid-career, it's like, hey, you have some data here. What have you liked about your last few roles? What haven't you liked? What do you want to do more of? What do you want to do less of? Like, really take some time and think about that, because it's hard. It's hard to get to know ourselves. It can be really challenging to read the label when you're inside the bottle. And humans in general, we're just so bad at really figuring out what we want. And oftentimes the thing we think we want isn't really the thing that will, ultimately make us happy. So anyone who's going through sort of a career disruption, I always tell them this is a really good time, and work with someone, a family member, trusted, mentor, or even your recruiter. Sit down and have a hard conversation and look at like, okay, what are your skill sets? How can we prove that out? How have you employed these? Are there skills you want to work with and grow in this next role? And knowing you, I bet you have those collaborative conversations where you're like, okay, I know Microsoft, I know Amazon, and I know, kind of the role, and I know their process for human development. Do you kind of come to that where like you're, I know you, just the brief conversations we've had, I know you can give, hard or just, encouraging, but sometimes like advice that maybe prunes away some of the rough stuff. Tell me a little bit about, as you're working with company to place and a recruit, how you sort of make sure that you're basically like bringing those into alignment, and making sure that, hey, this is going to be a good long-term fit. When I check back in 6 months, a year and a half, Microsoft, Amazon, whoever is going to trust that I bring them the best quality recruits, vet them properly, and make sure they're going to fit well in what they're putting together with their organization. There's a
Yeah,
question
it's
there, I promise, but long-winded.
yeah, no, you're
Get it?
good. I think it's really, having those kind of hard conversations, right?
Mm,
It's asking the pointed questions of both the employer and the potential hire, right? So asking the employer, what do you actually need, right? Because where a lot of companies go wrong from the very jump is they don't write the job description from the right perspective. They're like, hey, we have an
yeah,
opening and we're going to come up with 20 things that we think are going to fill what we need. But
yeah,
they're not thinking about, well, when it comes review time, what are we going to talk about? What is this
mm,
person supposed to having been done for the last
yeah,
3 months? Because if you write it from that perspective, then you're off in the right direction already. Because okay, I know what this person is responsible for. I know what I'm going to hold them accountable for. I know what they're expected to do, so that
yeah,
you can then work backwards from that and say, okay, so I do need a senior level person, or nope, I can do this with a mid level person with a little bit of training and a little
yeah,
bit of mentorship and a little bit of coaching. And I can save some money in the process. I'm giving them an opportunity to grow because now I can
mm,
put a career path, a growth trajectory in front of this person, kind of the whole carrot and the stick thing, right?
yeah, yeah,
And say, look, if you come in here, this is what our goal is for you in the next, 2 or 3 years, as an example.
yeah,
But then it's also on the employer side saying, okay, not only from a talent perspective, what do we need to fill this, but
yeah,
what is our culture that we're trying to build? What
mm,
direction are we trying to take this, and what personality type is going to fit this the best, right? Because,
yeah,
and this is
yeah,
another area that companies struggle in, is the whole interview process, right?
mm,
They're like, well, we need 8 interviews. No, you don't. If you need 8 interviews, all the people that are involved in your process should be thrown out and you should start over.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
and the data shows that more than 4 interviews don't increase the tenure of your hire. The problem is they're sending people in and not giving them clear direction on what they're supposed to evaluate the candidate on,
mm,
right? So
mm-hmm,
pulling from my Microsoft experience, every interviewer was assigned an area to evaluate the candidate on. So if it was a technical role, there was 1 or 2 people who were looking at coding. They were also looking at a couple other things, but there was somebody looking at culture fit and somebody looking at the fit as a whole, right? A more senior member looking at Are you really the overall fit that we're looking for? And so that when you come to the drawing board at the end, after you've interviewed all your candidates, you can then say, well, and then you need to have a scorecard, right? You need to determine what's the most important for this
Yeah.
role. Is it the technical skills? Is it the culture fit? Are they evenly weighted?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is going, because if you don't have a baseline to evaluate everyone on the same level, you're going to end up, well, my gut tells me, or my intuition says, 6 to 9 months down the road, where are you likely to be at? You're probably starting back over at square one because your gut or your intuition was wrong, because you didn't have a baseline to evaluate and truly determine who really is the best fit overall for this role based on the weight of the things that they need to have that we've determined are going to make this the most successful fit for this particular role.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's always where I start. Like, look, do you have a defined interview process? No? Okay, let's define your interview process. Do you have a scorecard? Have you thought about creating one? Nope,
Yeah.
let's create a scorecard, because you can't start looking for a role if you don't fully know what it is that you need to be able to fill that role.
Well, it's so good that you do, because that really seems like the nice full service offering that a recruiter can bring to the table. Because so often it's, I've been falling into this trap at companies where it's like, oh, we just need to hire. We have this gap, or person A is so stressed out. We clearly need another body to tackle this, and it's just sort of hire in response to frantic. Yeah, the frantic hire. Yeah, never seems to work.
And that
doesn't.
Yeah, and to take it even more full service, right? It's
Yeah.
it's going back even further than that, right? Because a lot of times what I'll ask my clients is, hey, so if you lose 25% of your revenue because the economy is going south, can you not only afford to keep the person that you want to hire, but also everyone else that you already have on staff?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's not put you in a bad place to begin with. But
Yeah.
also even further back than that, of like, okay, you told me who you wanted. Now, before we actually engage the search, let's go make sure that this person actually exists in the area that you want to hire them in, right? Because there is nobody on the market that I'm aware of that's working with their clients, and before they engage the search, pulling the data, because it's available. It's not that hard to find. You can go into any number of tools and pull talent market data with a specific title, experience, skill set, and it will tell you who the people are, where they sit, so that you also get an idea of how much is it going to cost me to get this person.
Yep.
If I want to go to the top of the market, am I going to have to pay $250,000? Is it going to cost me $300,000? Can I get them for $150,000? What does that look like? So that you have that full scale picture. Because going back to my agency days, it's like the sales guys would go out and be like, well, I just need a new client and I need you to, hopefully have 50 roles, and we're going to promise that we're going to fill them, but we have no idea if we actually can. And I can't tell you the number of times that I would get a role, and from the jump, it was clear that they were trying to kill two birds with one stone, because they combined two sets of skills that don't exist.
Yeah.
And they're like, go find me this person. I'm like, those things don't go together.
Yeah.
There is not any one person that you're going to find that can do this and do this, because they don't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's define the role, define the need. What was it that Drucker said? What gets measured gets done. Yeah. What are you going to measure this role on? What are the key outcomes? What does success look like? 3, 6, 9 months down the road. And it's, so.
And I think even
that sets everybody up for success, and
if
sets
I can even
expectations.
jump in there with one more thing is the other thing that companies do that sets them up for failures are like, okay, we need to hire. Okay, when do you need them by? Whenever. Well, if you're going to interview for 6 months, the people that you interviewed at the beginning are long gone by the time you get to the end.
Yeah.
Do you need this person in 90 days? You better start now. Do you need this person in 60 days? You better have started a month ago.
Yeah.
Like, when do you need this person in seat? Because it's the whole mantra of, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, when do you need this person? And then we can make sure that happens for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you nailed it. Well, and that's where you see if because there are, I mean, every every industry has their bad apples, right? I mean, dude,
Yep.
I mean, marketing, advertising, so take your pick. But yeah, I mean, recruiting. The stereotype is, oh, a recruiter is just seeking a warm body to make their commission, and then move on. They're not, putting in the craft and the work of like, okay, is this going to be a good hire? They don't care if it's going to be a good hire. They're just, serving up the warm bodies for the client to fill the role. And who cares if it, which I know isn't you, but I mean, anytime I've chatted with people who are working with recruiters, they're like, this person doesn't care about me. They don't care where I want to be in 6 months or a year. They just want to, get the placement, make their commission, and move on.
The whole throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks.
It just becomes a volume play, right? I was like, okay, well,
Yep.
maybe
It's
if I,
quantity over quality. And I'm the exact opposite. I'm like, look, if I send you 5 to 7 people, you ought to be able to find 3 or 4 that you want to interview. But I'm
yeah,
not going to send you 10 that 4 of them I'm like, maybe. No, you're going to be 80+% qualified, or I'm not going to send you over
yeah, yeah,
because it's a waste of everyone's time. The candidates, mine, and the client, as well as the hiring manager who's trying to hire for the role.
yeah. Nice. Cool. Well, we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but I'll ask my questions in reverse. So we've talked about some of the potential pitfalls, companies that bring in a recruiter might have, sounds like an undefined, not defining the role, not defining the responsibilities, and really thinking hard about, okay, what is this position, and just sort of reflexively, knee jerk, we need a person, get them in, and dragging feet. So literally not being like, you engage a proactive recruiter. I know, one of your touts is that, you're going to get someone like placement, 45 days or less. Like literally, like, I mean, if a company is like going to hire and they're going to call Matt, it's like, okay, immediately. Like we have the resources allocated, like this is go, which makes sense. I mean, that seems kind to, people who are looking, on the recruited side. You're putting yourself out there. I was chatting with someone last week who was like, yeah, I've put out 120 resumes and no bites. And that gets daunting. It seems like we should all kind of dial in and be a little more intentional about this process. It just feels like it would create a lot less thrash and just junk in the system if, we just kind of focus down. And when I'm helping companies kind of figure out who they are, articulating core values and building, a brand is fundamentally the story an organization tells its employees. It's the narrative that Amazon tells, that Microsoft tells themselves, as much as it is putting out into the marketplace.
Yep.
If Nike is Nike to the marketplace, Nike is Nike to their employees. Anyone who that I've chatted with who's looking at going there, I'm like, okay, are you competitive? Are you eager to jump in? Do you obviously like sports? And sporting, or at least like the spirit of competition. And you can kind of see these things. And anytime it's like, yeah, anytime I chat with someone who's sort of looking at doing a reboot, and that's, circling back to what I was saying earlier, like identify what you're really into, what your passions are, because now more than ever, companies are sort of getting culture craft, building the culture of the organization. They're getting more and more comfortable about putting that out there, and being bold and saying, hey, we're for this and that, and really, putting their money where their mouth is, and developing and curating a really strong employee experience.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that I work with my clients on is like, do you know what direction you're trying to go? Do you have your goals set for the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years? What does that path look like for you?
Yeah.
And who do you need to take you there?
Yeah. 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 So state of the industry, we're coming up on the end of 2023, like I mentioned at the open, 2024, there's some question marks. I mean, the R word, recession, I mean,
Yeah.
who knows? No one ever knows what the future is going to bring, but it feels like I mean, you look at some things and it's strong, but then there's a lot of other, inflation isn't still under control yet. So, what are you seeing? What are you hearing as you put your ear to the ground in terms of your industry, companies who are looking to hire? What's the general 5,000 foot view of what you see going on? And that can be in Seattle, that can be across the Northwest, around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the recruiting talent acquisition industry itself is hurting right now. There's a ton of people that were laid off over the last year, even just
Mm,
within the last couple weeks. So companies are really refining that part of their strategy.
mm,
I think what's the shift that's happening is companies are realizing they don't need as many full-time in-house recruiters, and that it's starting to make more sense to work with outsourced people like myself. Because when you have a full-time in-house recruiter, you're paying them a salary, you're buying their tools, you're paying their benefits. But what if you go 6 months without hiring? Now you have someone that you have to try and shove a square peg in a round hole so that you can
yeah,
justify keeping them. Otherwise, you're laying them off.
yeah,
Whereas you work with me, it's like you only pay me when you use me, and then 6 months down the road, when you're ready to hire some more people, you come back to me and then you pay me again. But that 6 months, you haven't had any expenses for that.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and looking into 2024, it really depends who you talk to. Like I've had people that are wildly optimistic and think that January is going to be huge and companies are going to start hiring like they were, towards the end of the pandemic. Like they're never going to be able to find the talent that they need again, right?
Mm,
And other people that I talked to are like, yeah, the real recession is coming in 6 to 9 months, and I heard that 2 months ago, so that would be 4 to 7 months from now. And I'm like,
yeah,
well, I don't know. And then you put in everything that the media is telling, and I take that with a huge grain of salt because when you look at the jobs report, you know that they're manipulating it so that it says what they want it to say, as
yeah,
opposed to what's actually true.
yeah.
And I was telling you this in the pre-show before we came live, but you know because the major the major companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, the FANG companies, the typical tech companies that hire in bulk aren't hiring at bulk. People are like, well, nobody's hiring. Well, that's not true. It's the startups, it's the venture backed startups, it's the small companies, it's the mid-sized companies that are doing the vast majority of the hiring right now. But
Mm,
it's coming through that active outreach, right? Because they don't have the name recognition, they don't have the brand recognition in the marketplace. So they can't go
yeah,
to Career Builder or Monster or Indeed or LinkedIn and post a job and think, okay, I'm going to get 1,000 applicants and
yeah,
hopefully review them all. No, you're not. That's not happening. Well, you
yeah,
might still get 1,000 applicants. 998 of them are going to be way out in left field and nowhere near qualified. So
yeah.
it makes more sense to have someone that's going to take that active approach to do that active outreach because,
Mm,
at least in the tech space where I operate, as of I think October, in the last 12 months, there have been like 220,000 tech employees that were laid off.
mm, mm,
So, and I
yeah,
know a large handful of people personally that are highly skilled in IT and engineering that cannot, for the life of them, seem to land a new role. And they're some of the most qualified people that I know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the end of, I mean, and companies are definitely tightening the way that they're hiring. They're really looking for that perfect fit. But I will tie this back to what I said earlier is that they, most of them ultimately don't actually know what they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
reading I was reading a post, and this is very apt too. As I was reading a post this morning, somebody presented a candidate, and the manager was like, "They're great," and the recruiter said, "Well, then you should offer them." And they're like, "No, I want to talk to more people." And the recruiter's like, "No, you really should offer them because they're interviewing other places and they're considering other offers."
Yeah.
2 weeks later, the hiring manager comes back and says, "Let's offer that candidate." The recruiter's like, "They're gone. Like I
Yeah.
told you that they were talking to other people." And the hiring manager was like, "Dang, they're the best candidate I talked to. I wish I would have listened to you." Yes, you should.
Yeah.
Like, and this is the thing too, both for recruiters and for companies that are looking to hire is if you don't trust that the recruiter that you're working with has the knowledge and you don't view them as a trusted partner in the space,
Mm, mm-hmm.
why are you working with them?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you're not going to listen to the expert, which is what you hired them to be,
Yeah.
then why did you hire them?
Yeah, yeah, no, you nailed it. I was chatting with an attorney over email, earlier this week, and looking at enlisting their services, and like I know the basics, but I bring in a specialist when I don't know what I don't know, because that person I trust that they are going to spend, they got years behind them. You're not just paying for like their experience now, you're paying for the 10, 20, 25 years they have behind them, and engaging fully with them, they're going to expand and see things that you don't. So similar, if I'm going to hire a recruiter, I'm going to hire someone who's seen a lot, who's been in, who's seen the boom cycles, who's seen the bust cycles, and if nothing else, is there just to kind of, at least on the recruited side, steer me right, and help me to keep my chin up when sent out and it seems like it's not happening, and be that sounding board and make me better than I can myself. We need, there is a time and place for specialists. So, yeah,
And I
no, absolutely,
I couldn't agree with you more on that, Tom. Honestly,
yeah, yeah,
like it's why are you hiring an expert if you don't trust them?
yeah, yeah,
Like you wouldn't
yeah,
hire a website developer and then challenge every single thing that they were doing
yeah,
if you're not a website developer. Why did
yeah.
you hire them if you're just going to challenge and nitpick everything that they do? Aren't they the expert? Isn't that why you hired them? So
Yeah.
why would you hire a recruiter or partner with a recruiter and then say, "No, I don't want to do what you told me to because I know better."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what are we doing again? But on the recruiting side, and this is something that I see talked about a lot, is companies often will view recruiters as commodities
Mm.
because we come from a position of like, well, I'm just here to serve you, but I'm not going to share any of my expertise. I'm not going to have those hard conversations. Full circle again, right? Of, hey, you don't know what you don't know, but I know
Mm.
what you don't know. And I'm going to tell you what you don't know while not making them feel small,
Yeah.
incompetent, any of those things, right? It's just like,
Yep. Yep.
look, I know what you don't, and this is why you hired me or you're partnering with me
Yeah.
is to have my expertise available to you, but then you have to listen when I tell you,
Yep.
look, this is why we need to do this because
Yeah.
if you wait 2 weeks, I just told you this candidate's talking to other companies. They're going to be gone,
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
can't come back to me and then be surprised that exactly what I said was going to happen happened.
It seems like there's a large element of this where just remembering, and it sounds no duh, but remembering there's a human on the other side of that you are
Yeah.
literally, I mean, and a career, it maps into livelihood, and especially for some really career driven people, it can map to identity and who you are and how you appear. There's some like big complex emotions in the space that, because this is such a, it's the Jenga block that holds a lot of the rest of life together. You're literally, yeah, working with someone's livelihood, their personal identity. No, good. I feel like
And
we've
that's
hit on the.
something,
Yeah,
and
no, go ahead.
I want to jump in here too because
Yeah, yeah,
this is something that I talk about a lot. Is there is a person on the other side of the resume. There's a
yeah,
person on the other side of the interview, right? Companies often will just treat them like another number,
hmm.
right? I hear so often, and I've seen this throughout my career of, well, you interviewed and then we sent you a generic rejection email 3 weeks later. We gave you no actionable feedback. We didn't say, hey, here's a personalized thank you for
Yeah,
spending the time learning about our company, letting us learn more about you. Here's where
yeah,
you fell short, right?
yeah,
I'll share this and we can move on. But
yeah, yeah,
I read a survey that was done. This is probably 2 months ago. They surveyed candidates and said, essentially, like, what would your buying patterns be towards a company that you had a poor interview experience with?
hmm. Yes,
More,
yes, yeah,
more than half said that they would strongly consider no longer buying that company's products.
yes. And I
So this
love,
is
I love that you brought this up.
this is the other major piece that I focus on is look, so you have your client or your customer brand, right? but you also have your candidate brand. You also have your
Yeah.
potential employee brand. And so many employers are completely neglecting that.
Yeah.
They're like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. I can treat people like cattle and
Yeah.
people are just going to keep coming back. But the thing is, and I think I mentioned this during our first conversation. Maybe I didn't. I talked to a lot of people about this, but it's like, let's look at there's two different experiences that people are going to have that they're most likely to leave a review in. Either they had an over the top amazing experience, or it was the exact opposite and it was atrocious. It was terrible. It couldn't have been
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
The last
Yeah.
thing that you want as an employer, because candidates are smart, because the smart candidate is going to review and research your company to prepare for their interview. Do you want the first 10 reviews of your company that they see to be candidates bashing you because you can't close the loop because you don't know what you're doing? Like, you're never
Yeah.
going to get the right talent if that's the perspective and the approach that you take to treating people that potentially are going to come work for your company. Like, that is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
end all be all. Like, live by the golden rule, and
Yes.
I
Yeah.
know it's so far down the platitudes in our society anymore, but as a company, if you want to attract the right talent, that has to be almost
Yep.
priority number one when it comes to getting the talent that you're looking for. Treat
Yeah.
them like a human, close the loop with them, even if it's a personalized email
Yeah.
for somebody who went through your entire interview process. They gave you 3 or 4 hours of their time, probably had to take a couple days off of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, the very least that you can do is say, hey, thank you so much for taking the time. Here is some actionable feedback as to why you didn't get the offer for the role that you interviewed for.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you nailed it. Yeah. This is something I'm a huge believer in, the opportunity for the hiring process to be a part of the branded experience. Like, it becomes how, if you can get an HR director to chat with a marketing director, how do we make this a really positive, engaging, productive, helpful experience so that, yeah, if a interviewee goes away, they don't go away upset. It feels good, even if it doesn't come out the way they want to. And especially for these larger companies that, I mean, you probably know better than I, they may have a lot of a non-negligible amount of candidates cycle through. So that is a surprisingly large audience, and they may not be there for this role, but do you want them coming back down the road where, maybe they were just a 97% fit? But it's, yeah, such an opportunity to be way better than we have. And yeah, giving feedback, steering things. And I know, sometimes HR is a little nervous about what you can and can't tell people, I'm sure. But yeah, just giving honest, forthright feedback can be deeply powerful.
And there's, I mean, there's definitely guidelines around what you can and can't tell someone.
Yes.
But I'm not sitting here advocating for every little piece of feedback to be shared. Like,
Yeah.
don't nitpick the candidate apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, so going back to my time at Microsoft, I would give the candidate themed feedback, right? So if they were
Mm,
like, their coding wasn't just at the level that we needed it to be, or they missed this and this culture trait that we're looking for,
yeah.
I gave them that feedback, because sometimes it's as simple as adjusting your interview approach.
Mm,
You need to refine how you're answering interview questions,
yeah.
because while you may have answered the question, the example wasn't clear enough so that the interviewer could understand, oh, you did actually demonstrate this. You do have this ability. So a
Mm,
lot of times it's you just need to learn how to interview better. But
yeah.
sometimes it's also, look, you applied for a role that was a little bit over your head. Keep working, come back to
Yeah.
us in, 6 months to a year, and we're happy to interview you again. I gave that feedback, I don't know how many times.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, do you think that there's a little bit of an element of that, of just interviewing to get more interviews behind you, and just to build, especially for earlier stage career individuals, just it's like a muscle, right? The more comfortable you get in just presenting yourself, sitting down and just holding forth, being confident, talking about your insights, getting honest feedback, refining, doing it again. Seems like, regardless of whether you get the role, you're leveling up your interviewing capacity and just making sure that you appear and present the best you can for the next opportunity.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I did
Yeah.
this early in my career and I was terrible at interviewing. I still wouldn't say that I'm an expert at it by any stretch of the imagination, but
Oh,
I can prep you so that you can be the best at interviews. But you have to do the work, right? Like
yeah.
I, as a
Yeah.
recruiter, can give you all of the information, but again, I can't tell you how many times I gave candidates everything that they needed
Yeah.
to do to be prepared for the interview, and they did none of it, and then wondered why they didn't get the job. It's like, dude, I
Yeah.
told you this is what you need to do. This is how you need to answer the questions. This is what all of this looks like. And
Yeah.
then you're just like, yep, I got it. Didn't look at anything, didn't do any research, did none of that, and then are surprised when, oh, I got bad feedback.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I told you what you needed to do, but yeah, to fully answer your question, go on as many interviews as you can early in your career, even to mid career. Honestly,
Yeah.
like go interview, go refine that craft because it can honestly be the make or break between getting the job that you want, that you're well qualified for. But if you can't present yourself in the right light, it's it's not going to work, right? Like I got the
Yeah.
feedback, even just within a couple of years, that I was too confident in my
Hmm.
presentation of myself,
Hmm.
and so it was kind of almost intimidating, right, to people because I was like, well, I kind of walked around in interviews like my crap doesn't stink, right? But
Yeah.
that's not the attitude to have. It's that confident humbleness, right?
Yeah.
Of I know a lot, but I also know that I don't know everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
that's
that's a
regardless
it's a
of what
nuance.
level that you're at, right? C
Yeah.
suite, whatever. Like I
Yeah.
know this, but companies are always looking for people that they can teach and train.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you're going to own a company and you're going to manage everyone else,
Yeah.
there is something else that you can learn and grow from.
Yeah, don't they say hire for personality and culture fit and then train for skills, train for the role? That's the easiest thing versus trying to give someone a personality transplant and say, oh, I'm going to make
Yeah.
you able to fit into our organization.
Yeah, because you can't make, again, you can't make a square peg fit in a round hole.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you're lacking a couple of skills that I know I can train you on, and this is something that I push back on people on all the time, and I did it often at Microsoft. I'm like, wait, so they're missing one little thing, and you don't think that you can train them and coach them and mentor them on that for 6 to 9 months, and they couldn't figure it out to be the person that you really need for your team?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I see articles about this all the time of like the skill development, the talent development is where the focus needs to be right now. Like,
Yeah.
don't go looking for the, and I'm not saying don't ever do this because you do need to, especially if you're growing and you've got big plans, but you don't always have to land the big fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you need to land the medium one
Yeah.
and then invest in them
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
grow
Yeah.
them.
I mean, it's hard to on the recruited side. It's hard to think of a skill that could have a bigger impact on your life trajectory than getting really solid at interviewing. I mean, if that next job you land and you increase your salary, increases your potential, gives you opportunities to be mentored, curate your career, layer on those skills. During COVID lockdown, I returned to Toastmasters,
Yeah.
which I was a public speaking minor. I felt pretty good being in front of a group, but we were all remote, so I was like, why not? And it was interesting because we met on Zoom. It was over the camera, so it was a lot of really Toastmasters has done their research, and the main reason that people engage is for hiring and career purposes, to secure that next role, to get confident for the interview. And it was really nice in that respect, to like you said, layer on that self-awareness with the ability to clearly and concretely present yourself. The craft, and interviewing is a craft. It's a skill. It's something that you do. And if you do, the more you do it, the better you're going to get, the more comfortable you're going to get, and the more feedback you're going to enable with people, mock interviews, sample interviews, mock interviews with your recruiter. You're going to be able to get that feedback if someone is willing to give it to you directly and honestly and kindly and generously. And that was the biggest thing I got out of public speaking at Toastmasters. The feedback was direct, and sometimes it might have stung a little bit, but it was all in a spirit of generosity, in a spirit of
Yeah.
making you better. And it wasn't, yeah, you didn't critique just to be mean. You critiqued and received the critique to just up your game and be that little bit better the next time.
Yeah, 100%. And it doesn't, and I think the hard thing too, especially when you're, kind of in that desperation state, right, for a
Yeah.
role, to to hear that not positive feedback can be hard in the moment.
Mm.
Um, but sharing from personal experience, I can think back to multiple interviews where after I got that kind of harsh feedback, and in the moment, I was like, oh, that was rude. Like, I did really well at that interview, like I couldn't have done better, right?
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, it's like, oh wait, nope, they were right. I don't present as well as I think I do,
Yeah.
because we always have the better view of ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Than
Yeah.
than other people tend to have, right? We put ourselves a step higher than we probably should put ourselves. It's like,
Yeah.
take the feedback, take some time
Yep.
to sit with it, because professionally, it can only help you if you get that kind of feedback and then take the steps to apply it to
Yeah.
be better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the best time to look for your next job is when you have a job.
A
You're not
hundred
in that
percent.
panic mode. There are two types of people on LinkedIn. There are the people who just hang out on there and see it as a viable social network, all the time, 24/7. And then, we know the people who just pop in when, if I get hit up by someone, I'm like, I can tell, like, are they looking for their next gig?
Yep.
Which is a prime time to network, but what would it look like if you popped in more often and curated the network, even when, you had a role, and you just worked on, just having conversations and prepping it, before you need it. So much good can come from those loose connections, those second, friend of a friend, or, I think of all the things that have come into my life because it wasn't the first person, but, someone saying, hey, you and I we had this conversation before. You have someone that you chatted with this morning where you're like, oh man, I got to introduce Tom to this person. Because good people know good people. I mean, I sort of had this pivot a few years ago on LinkedIn where I was like, I'm just going to connect with people who look and sound interesting. They're maybe in an adjoining space or even in different lanes. I mean, we can learn so much by getting out of our specific industry or our focused area. This ability to sort of cross pollinate and draw inspiration from other people who maybe aren't where we're at geographically, industry wise, career wise, can be just profound, I think.
Oh, 100%. I
Yeah.
mean, cross network, because you also don't know who you might meet that you didn't think was going to be a good connection, that turned
Mm-hmm.
out to be the best connection that
Yeah.
you ever made, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Nailed
So
it. Yeah.
don't close the door on people just because in the moment you're like, what do you want from me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, always be open to having those conversations. And that's whether you're
Yeah.
employed, unemployed, looking for a job, not looking for a job, you know, always be
Yeah.
open to conversations, because like you said, you don't know who that person knows
Yep.
that they might be able to intro you, even if they're not the person that you want to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. And just layered on top of that, the power of generosity and being able to
Yeah.
go first. Some of the best networking, like online networking groups I found myself in are those where we have one that's based on the book The Go Giver. I
Hmm.
forget the author, but it's all about people showing up and, trying to help each other. Whatever you need, wherever you're at, can I help you before without any expectation of reward? I'm not helping you because,
Yeah.
maybe you'll help me in the back end. And it just seems like it just seems to lead to a nicer, more productive mind space, of generosity, of, call it what you will, like the abundance mindset or whatever. But just sort of, I find it returns me to just humanity. It reminds me that, especially when we do so much through screens, it's just a little reminder of, okay, this person on the other side of the screen is a human, flesh and blood human being. They had a mom and dad. They have maybe I have kids. They have a partner.
Yeah.
It's just a really good reminder of that as we go about, versus just like, I'm going to step on this person to get closer to ringing
Exactly.
that brass bell or whatever.
Exactly. 100%
Yeah.
correct, Tom.
Yeah, I love it. So good. No, I love this. I was really looking forward to this conversation, Matt. Anything you want to leave people tuning in with? Maybe someone who's in the hiring process or company who's looking to bring on a recruiter. The space is yours.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, look, if you're having any sort of issues and you're hiring or recruiting, wherever that is in your process, if you're unsure of anything, come talk to me. I will give you an hour free consultation to talk about your issues, and we might solve it in that hour, and you're going to get a free solution for your problem, or we may determine that we need to have a longer relationship. I need to do some more work. We need some more insight, some more looking. You need help planning. How do we even go about doing this hiring? This is where we're at. This is where we're trying to go. We're concerned about this. We're not sure about that. Come have a conversation with me.
Yeah.
I love talking to people about anything recruiting and hiring because there's so much that companies get wrong. And you
Yeah.
don't want to be one of those people who makes a mistake that you don't have to make because you thought you knew more than you actually did.
Mm.
Because it could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars and it could happen overnight if you're not careful.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I try and maintain a kitchen cabinet board of advisors, and you are absolutely on that in the hiring and recruiting space. Also because you're a fellow Northwesterner who, can endure some of the rain and gray and clouds up here.
I try.
Excellent.
There's not enough
Yeah.
vitamin. There's not enough vitamin D in the world. I don't think for that though, Tom.
Apparently eat lots of mushrooms, the white mushrooms. That was someone told me that gets your vitamin D up. Well, at least we have all the good coffee. So, that's the offset.
If only I was a coffee drinker, but I'm not.
Oh man, you're stronger than I am, Matt. All
I,
right.
I'll say this and we'll wrap up. I learned
Yeah.
I learned years ago that coffee was more in my head than the actual benefit.
Ah, that's like very zen right there. I'm just gonna have to leave it at that. That's like meta statement there.
Love it.
Matt Luensmann, thanks for taking the time to hop on this stream with me. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks to everyone who tuned in now. In the future, the archive will be up. So, yeah, always great to unpack hiring, recruiting, being recruited, and just explore the space.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks for having me, Tom. It was awesome.
No problem, man. Thanks.